wanted to bring someone on the topic of finances and spending. I wanted to bring someone in that could eloquently vocalize the difference between different types of finances, credit, working with credit. Some people don't work with credit when it comes to relationships, and overall, this person that I brought, he's a close friend of mine. He owns several businesses. He's a well-esteemed man, if I may say so myself. So can we give a round of applause for Carlton and Nia?
Well, I'm glad to be here. When he first gave me the invite, I'm the type of person, like the second I get something, my brain just automatically go to work. And then I was like, Lord have mercy. These some good gems, so I gotta record it. So that's why I set up the cameras. But essentially, I would say there's a few different things to go over, especially when it comes to having a successful success in finances when it comes to your marriage. As you guys know, like finances is like one of the biggest pushes for divorce and things like that, because they're not one in one accord when it comes to finances. The first thing that I would say is, as far as me, I learned that the greatest teacher in finances is the Bible. The Bible has so many different gems when it comes to how to manage finances, how to deal with opposition when it comes to anything that needs to be handled, right? So that's where majority of, I would say, my principles come from when it comes from financing, and obviously from learned experiences. So just to give you guys a little background on our finances, when we first got married, I was broke as a joke. I had $20 to my name. I was just coming out of ICE custody. That goes into my testimony. Maybe next time I can get into that. But I was just coming out of ICE custody, and she's the one that held it down as far as everything when we first, when I first got out and we were, married. Me eating, my clothes, everything was her. Every crazy investment idea I had, she's the one that funded it. So the first thing that I would say is, when it comes to Christians, we aren't subjugated to worldly principles. I think that's the first thing that every Christian need to understand. So like a lot of the conversations that you hear people are having on social media when it comes to 50-50 and gender roles and things like that, that's for the world to argue about. That's not something Christians need to bother themselves with. Because first and foremost that the same way, the Bible tells us to store up our treasures in heaven, we know that we're supposed to make investments for the future, not for right now, right? Yeah. So when it comes to marriage, it's the same way, right? Nothing is always going to be, instant. Everything is good right now. Everything is great right now. No, sometimes you want to do some sacrificing, do some suffering in the beginning because, later you're going to be able to reap the benefits. So that's the first thing that I would say, is do not be caught up with trying to fulfill different things that you think you need to fulfill, right? What you need to do first and foremost is figure out what works for you, right? Don't burden yourself with thinking, okay, this is what I need to do. Obviously, you should have your own goals, whatever the case may be. You should have, especially as for the men, right? You should know where is it that I'm going to take my family, right? What things am I putting together? What things am I planning? If my wife asks me what's, the year goal, the 5-year plan, I should have an answer, right? So even though I may not be there now, I know where I'm going. So, but as of right now, that's not a burden to carry, because you already know where you are right now, and you know where you're looking to go. So there's so many different things to go over. So if y'all have any questions, y'all can stop me. Go ahead.
Real quick, you introduced yourself a little too humble for me. Can you actually give us your credentials?
Okay.
Who you are, for real. Stop playing.
Okay, so I've been an entrepreneur all my life, since middle school. I've known Kiara since elementary, so since middle school, I used to go to school selling snacks. I've only had one job my whole life, as far as like a W-2, and that was in high school, and it lasted like 3 months. But everything else has always been on the grind. I've built every business that I've had so far. I've been able to build it to 5 figures a month. Every business I've done, I can say I've done pretty well for myself. But again, we all started from nothing. I just told you guys I had $20 when we first got married. I can definitely say when it comes to the success and the foundation, it was with my wife, right? A lot of the things that she did and she sacrificed is what gave us the opportunity to get to where we are now. So her trusting in my vision is I would say the foundation of where we are now. If she was like skeptical or hesitant to follow along with what I wanted to do, then I don't think we would be here now. I think that's.
What are your businesses?
Oh,
Some of your businesses?
I have a credit repair business. I have a venue space, and I do real estate. Yes, that's everything. And I do real estate, correct. It's called Azalea Gardens. So the venue space is essentially my backyard. The backyard is like 10,000 square feet. So we just completely renovated it and allowed people, to throw parties back there. Any other questions? I think I covered everything. So again, foundation, as Christians, we're not subjugated to worldly conversations, worldly things. We focus on what works for us, and obviously for the men, we need to have a plan on where it is that we're going. Now, one of the number one things that I tell people when it comes to finances in a marriage is there's going to be two people that's going to work the hardest to destroy your finances. That's the devil and your wife. Listen. Listen. From personal experience and from talking, and this is why, I have a lot of brothers. All my siblings is brothers, right? I have 6 brothers, 5 brothers, including me. I make 6. And every time someone marries into the family, that's the first thing that I tell them, to emphasize the importance of a wife knowing how she's going to support and how she's going, what her role is going to be when it comes to the finances, right? You see a trend where they think it's cute for the wife to be, ignorant of what's going on with the finances, or to be irresponsible when it comes to spending, and it's not cute. It's not cute. It's not funny. It's not good at all. And that's what ends up happening, where I've had, not to put her out there, but I've had conversations with my wife where it's I'm not even against her spending money. I just say, don't put it on the credit card, because we're trying to keep our debt at a minimum. Right. You check the credit card, you see Amazon. And it's spending the money isn't the problem. Just use cash, because we don't want to build up, when it comes to the debt. Mm-hmm. And so one thing that I've learned, especially in almost every area as a husband, is that the number one thing that you need to emphasize is your communication, especially when it comes to your wife. That's good. The Bible says to dwell with your wife in understanding. And I think for me specifically, I think a lot of men are like this, but I'll speak for me myself. I try to force people to think and behave how I do it, right? So if I'm going to explain something, I'm going to explain it how I would understand it, not trying to make sure that, I'm explaining it the way you would understand it. And doing it like that is not dwelling with understanding. If I know my wife is a visual learner, right, I'm not going to try to be very descriptive with her. I'm going to try to communicate in a way for her to fully understand where it is that we're going, what is it that we're trying to accomplish. So for the women, it's very important that you really know what is it that you guys are trying to do. And do not be a thorn when it comes to the finances. And for the men, communication, very, very, very important. Too many times we take our simplicity and try to use that simplicity to govern the world and govern our marriages, and that's not good and that's not healthy. That form of lack of communication can cause a lot of unnecessary problems. And anytime problems arise, the first thing you need to do, no matter who's at fault, is examine yourself, right? Because especially as the husband, if you're called to be a leader, if something is out of whack, you need to obviously examine your leadership. Any questions? No questions? No questions? Okay. Next, managing expenses. So, again, what I said earlier is everybody is going to have their own system. Me personally, what I find to be the easiest thing to do is going to be having one account for all of the expenses, and then have a separate account for the husband, and a separate account for the wife, and then all of the income goes into that account that's for the expenses, and then you guys choose a set amount to put in your individual accounts, whether it's each month or bi-weekly or anything like that. But again, it's always going to be dependent on your income, how often it comes in, how much you make, and things like that. Credit is very important. I can't stress enough what people are able to do if they manage their credit correctly. One thing that I've noticed from all of the couples credit that I fix is they both make bad decisions. It's like dummy one and dummy two. It's like they're both making bad decisions. Both of them having credit cards maxed out, and they're both authorized users on each account. So it's very important for you guys to monitor your credit. I check my credit every day or every 3 days. Like, that's how serious I take it. You need to, right? When you're trying to make those big leaps, whether you're trying to buy a house or whether you have a business opportunity and you're trying to get a business loan, whatever, things like that, you want to make sure those things are already prepared so that when that time comes, you don't have to try to rush to get things fixed. And this is going to tie in to the credit. But one thing that I've learned in business is that there's no such thing as 50-50, right? There's no such thing as me and you being equal partners. And I would say this is what helped me and my wife get to where we're at now, is because she trusted me with a lot of the financial decisions. And ultimately, one person needs to be that person that's making those concrete decisions, right? And I'm going to get on the flip side in a minute. And obviously, 9 times out of 10, that's almost always going to be the husband, which is why I was going into making sure that you know where you're going. Now, here's where being a leader comes into role. You can't be the type of person that rules with an iron fist, right? So if you're doing something and let's say you're managing the expenses, right? This compromise is me making sure that if there's something that my wife needs, right, we're going to add that into expenses. It doesn't have to be big, but let's say she's very big on making sure her hair is done. That's included into the expenses on how we manage. Let's say if it's nails, let's say if it's a specific hobby, because when you're sacrificing, right, a lot of the times the wife tends to sacrifice more when it comes to the expenditures, right? Because again, as men, it's pretty simple. So it's pretty easy to just wake up and do the same thing every day and not really have to spend money. You see? Whereas, the wife, her pockets is itching 24/7. She always seeing something on Amazon or Temu that needs to be purchased. So yes, I think that's going to be the healthiest way to make sure that she has some form of satisfaction while still sacrificing the things that she needs to sacrifice. And you're making sure that we're going where we need to go when it comes to our finances. Any questions?
I have a question. So what would you say for some marriage dynamics that maybe it's the husband who is more of the spender? Like,
You see what I'm talking about?
it's a general question. It could apply to anybody. But if the husband is more of a spender, like what would you?
I would say that goes back into communication. And remember I said earlier of the wife not being ignorant of the finances, right? So if you're checking the accounts or checking the statements and you see all of these expenses, then you have to bring it to them like, yo, like, we need to slow down. I would say I'm not the best when it comes to, hello, what's the word I want to use? I'm not the best when it comes to like consequences. Like, I'm very extreme. Like, I mean, I'm shutting credit cards off. I'm changing logins. Listen, like, I'm not gonna lie. I run a very tight ship. I'm gonna say it once, maybe twice, but after that, I'm putting things into action. I don't know how it's gonna look on the wife's side, but I would say the number one thing is going to be communication. And this is where I would say, as the men, we need to constantly examine ourselves to make sure that we're heading in the right direction, right? We're dwelling with understanding. We're loving our wives as Christ loved the church, and all of those good things like that. We're not being, a dictator or authoritative. So it's going to be hard, right, if the husband is the one messing up the finances while he's the one that's supposed to be, leading and do all of these different things. So for you, all I can say is God be with you. I ain't gonna lie.
I got a question.
Go ahead.
What happens when the wife is like a banking symbol? I'm kidding.
You said banking?
My question is this. I know a lot of people who, I think a couple of you guys, have any of you guys taken Financial Peace University? You have?
Yeah.
So I know there's couples that I know who don't touch credit at all. Mm-hmm. Could you, I guess, give your 2 cents on the importance of credit or the importance of not really using it in your perspective?
I would say do what works for you. I wouldn't, let's say for example, someone don't want to touch credit. What I would say is only use your credit for what you have cash for, right? So let's say for example, you're looking to purchase a new vehicle, but you want to spend cash. So instead of you spending cash, you just put it on your credit, but then use the cash to pay the exactly. Not even auto pay, because what you want to do, one of the number one reasons people want to pay cash is to avoid the interest. So all you got to do is do the mathematics. Okay, how many payments do I have to do? How many additional payments towards the principal that I have to do so that I pay the least amount of interest, so I can get the benefits of credit, but not have to really use my credit too much. Right. Because one of the biggest problems with people that don't use credit is a lot of institutions see them as a risk. Right? If your credit file is empty, then, now you're trying to buy a house and they want you to put 10, 15, 20% down. Or let's say if you want to do like a bank statement loan, if you're trying to buy a house, that's another high down payment, and they're going to want, higher interest. So I would still say use credit, but only do it to where you're comfortable. Right? Because for me, with business, credit is everything. I leverage credit all of the time. Right? Like my first house that I bought was off credit cards. Now, I wouldn't advise everybody to do that, because if you don't have the discipline, you're going to be in bankruptcy court. Yeah. So it really depends on and this is where you got to know your strengths, right? So for the husband and the wife, this is where you have to have that conversation to be realistic. Okay, this is where I'm strong at. I'm very strong at being disciplined. I'm very strong at managing finances. I'm very strong at creating itemized lists and all of these different things. Or where another person, I'm very strong at keeping track of the bills, knowing when this come out, when that comes out. Or I'm very strong when it comes to investing and things like that. So I would definitely say for each person to lean into their strengths and capitalize off of that. That's what I would say. I would say one of the biggest issues that I see with Christians specifically is, I want to say, like, their lack of expectation when it comes to their finances, right? So too many times people get, it's like they allow the world to teach them about money and let the world put certain expectations and stigmas upon Christians when it comes money, which is why, like, for example, if you see a pastor with something expensive, they're quickly to criticize it. But if you see a rapper with it, they'll probably be praising for it, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they have this type of car, right? So it's not to say that you guys go out and go spend a whole bunch of money, but it's to say that you shouldn't be afraid of having a lot of money, right? And there's, me personally, this is the truth. There's no better person to have money than a Christian, right? Because a person that already have a good heart posture, a person that already have a purpose, right? They're going to be more inclined to do for the world. They're going to be more inclined to lift up and edify the body of Christ and things like that. So this is why I'm always on top of him. I'm like, yo, you gotta bring up the business. Like, you gotta stop playing and double the business. You gotta do X, Y, and Z. But something else that I told him as well is the more money you make, the more you should be sacrificing to God as far as like spiritual, like prayer and reading your word. Because in my first business, which was teeth whitening, I used to go house to house whitening people's teeth. The second I was at like $5,000 a month, I mean, everything started going downhill. I wasn't praying. I wasn't reading my word. Because the only thing that was on my mind was how to make more money. And it made me realize what Jesus meant when he says easier for, the eye of a camel to go through a needle than for a rich man to go to heaven. And it's because it's like money has this power where the second you get a taste of it, it's like a dopamine, right? Where you want more, and it becomes essentially like a high. And I'm like, wow, if only $5,000 a month.
Because I can say for like me and FNL, a lot of times we can become like in that mode, like very money oriented in a way, and like it doesn't look good on us. So what was your experience in kind of like going through that rough patch and then I guess overcoming it, like getting on the other side?
I think it's easier for us because she's not an entrepreneur. So she's not like the type of person to wake up 5, 6 in the morning and working and all that other stuff. So I think it's easier for me because I'm the one that's more so logging in the long hours. But I would definitely say as far as like how our marriage is as the income increases, is it gets easier, right? So now she's able to buy the things that she wants. We're able to vacation, when we want and all of these different things. I'm trying to think of what difficulty. I would say the only thing that I emphasize to her is whatever you do now, you're going to do later. So for example, if you have a bad habit when you're only making, $5,000 a month, you're going to have that habit is just going to multiply when you get more money, right? So what I emphasize to her is you need to have a strict program on how you spend money, how much you put away, the ratio of how you spend, right? Because if you're spending recklessly, again, at 5,000, you're gonna do the same thing at 50,000, just at a greater scale. So I would say for us, it just got easier because money, what it does is it buys convenience, right? So for example, one of the things that we were able to do with our first child was like have a nanny, right? So now she's able to, sleep in throughout the day, and then the nanny leaves, and if she have to wake up in the middle of the night, it's not as burdensome. So things like that makes marriage easier. So that's what I'm saying.
Your time, like the fact that being gone.
For me, I work on my phone, so it's not a problem. So anywhere we go, I might be on my phone a lot, but I'm there. You feel me? So I'm not a person that's always, out the house. I'm home every day. So it's gonna differ depending on what that person do, but that goes again to the necessary sacrifices that you need to make in the beginning so that later you can enjoy the fruits of it. But then again, it also goes into your planning, because one of the problems, I would say, obviously this goes more into the men, is that a lot of the times they can't let things go. So for example, if I made a plan to say, okay, when we get to this, we're going to retire or whatever the case may be, but men love to work. So now it's like they just keep pushing it back. That too, right? So now what they end up doing is they keep pushing it back. They're neglecting their wife. I'm pretty sure you guys see what happened with like Tom Brady, where his wife kept asking him, okay, you done now. You got all these accolades. just retired, and he's like, one more season, and then I was like, nah, I'm leaving, right? So I would say that's what's most important is for the men to stay true to whatever goal or plan that they had in place, so that they can make sure that they're devoting their time, energy, to making sure that they cater to their wife.
I was gonna ask for how you guys do the splitting. Do you guys discuss? Is it up to your preference how you spend the money that's in your account, whatever you guys decided to put in your account, or is that still a discussion in terms of what you're purchasing?
Well, for me and my wife, it's a discussion for her, but it's not a discussion for me. And here's why I say that. I'm not the type of person that spends like on foolishness, right? She is though. So it's like if she knows if I'm spending, it's either going to make us something back or it's something that actually is necessary, right? Whereas for her, it's not like that. So for her, I would say, for me, I give her more so of like a budget. So it's like a lot of things she don't have to come to me and say, okay, I'm getting ready to spend this. But for when it crosses a certain threshold, she gonna need some authorization, or it gotta get returned. You feel me? So
That's more like leisurely, like
yeah, something minuscule. You feel me? But
What's something that you for leisure? What's something that you like to spend?
Yeah, I would say vacation. I'm not a person that's big. I'm just now getting into spending on clothes, but I'm not big on clothes, not big on jewelry. I'm not even big on cars. Like, my main focus, if it's not making me money, I'm not worried about it, right? So like even with my cars, like every car that I buy, no matter how much it costs, I have to make sure that I put my business on it. And it's like, if the car isn't making me money, I get rid of the car and find another car that's gonna make me money. So yeah, I'm not a big spender. On vacations I am. I'm not gonna lie. But on everything else, no.
How do you feel about purchasing brand new vehicles?
The dumbest thing you could ever do. Yeah, that's the worst thing you can ever do. Like,
why?
So the three most important things in finance is going to be interest, taxes, and equity. Anytime you want to make money, keep money, those are the three things that you're trying to either avoid or obtain, right? So you always want to avoid interest, you always want to avoid taxes, right? But you always want to obtain equity. Whereas with cars, we already know, the depreciation on cars is crazy. Which is why when you lease a car, what you're leasing is a rental price and the negative equity that, the car is losing. So with cars, like let's say for example, right? I was looking into the Cadillac Escalade. A 2026 one is like $130,000, right? And a 2021 is like $60,000, right? So that's almost a $60,000 difference in 5 years. Yeah. So that means if you buy a 2026 one in 5 years, you're not only losing, right, that $60,000, but you're also losing the payments that you already put towards it. Right. So, yeah, brand new cars is the worst thing you can ever do. Every time you buy a car, the best thing you can do is get a car that's at least 4 to 5 years old.
I have a question. It's more just to take at your brain, right?
Crazy?
So we've been talking about liabilities. All that I've heard is mainly liabilities. We talk about debt. That's a liability. That being said, let's talk about assets. You did mention investments, right? There's a lot of investments you could do. You could do the stock market, obviously real estate. My thing, what I do, right, is I like to, I'm not going to give a hint, but I'm going to basically give a hint to see where you're at. Buying power. Protecting your buying power, that's the greatest thing that should honestly be in everybody's mind. The dollar has actually been losing buying power year over year since 1964, ever since we came out the gold standard. That being said, buying power, what are your thoughts on that? And also the second question would be investment, passive income, and how would you generate more other than the stock market? which pays dividends, and then there's some stocks that pay monthly dividends on top of, of course, you got your REITs, so on and so forth.
So with buying power, I'm guessing you're more so alluding towards like precious metals, commodities, and things like that. Yeah. So
I was just wondering if you would.
yeah, I'm hip to that. Like for me, I never got into like commodities or precious metals. I invested more into crypto.
I'm sorry. Like that's like gold.
Yeah, gold, silver. As far as that, my main thing or my main advice whenever it comes to increasing income is never to even look into precious metals or investing, but it's always going to be having a skill, right? Because obviously everybody have to start from somewhere. So the number one thing that I always advise people to do is find a skill, right? Be good, with your hands at something, because that's what's going to make the money, right? Let's say, for example, if gold right now is 3,500, but your bank account say 100, you're not gonna be able to get any gold. But if you are able to learn a skill, learn a trade, and then you use that to increase your income, then you move on to the next level of investing. Then you move on to the next level of being able to purchase commodities at a high level, or whatever the case may be. But if somebody that do have the income, of course, I would always recommend to do that. Because not only, like you said, it protects your buying power, but it also works as a form of saving, right? So that's why for me, I love real estate. It's like when I look in my account, I could have an idea of how much should be in there, but for some reason, it's like the dollars is growing legs and walking out, right? It's like it doesn't make sense how the account go up and down. I be feeling like the bank is stealing, but that's another. I don't know. But it's like with real estate, you have an exact amount of, okay, this is how much money I spent when it comes to purchasing. This is how much I put into rehab. This is what the appraisal came at. This is how much equity that I have. And you literally have the numbers, and you know exactly how much you have invested. You know exactly how much, you're supposed to be pulling out and things like that. So it works, great when it comes to as a saving mechanism if you're doing like things like rentals or anything like that. But now as far as investing and getting passive income, now there's not, people say passive income, but there's not really a way of doing passive income unless you take yourself completely out of the picture, right? So income only become passive when you don't really have to do anything for it. Whereas a lot of the things that you do, you would have to do things for it. So even when it comes to real estate, people say, rentals is passive income. It's definitely not, right? It's not passive income at all. You can say it's residual income, but it's not passive. So as far as investing, to do like buying assets, trying to do residual or passive income, again, it goes based off of where you are now. My number one advice for people is always to come together, right? Because, 5 people with, 10,000 is better than one person with 10,000. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people are missing when it comes to investing is they're losing, the power of numbers, right? Where everybody want to be self-made, everybody want to do things by themselves. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes you can do. Obviously, the number one thing or the number one avenue people typically have is family. So obviously, you should know what type of family you have before you get into that. But then obviously you branch off. If family isn't good, then you branch off into networking with like-minded individuals, people that share principles and values. For me, I don't do business. I can do business with someone that isn't a Christian, but I can't get into business with someone that isn't a Christian. You feel me? So that I would say is one of the best things you can do if you're trying to get into purchasing assets and things like that. Another thing that I would say is figuring out a way to take liabilities and convert them into assets, right? So this is where you get into leveraging your debt, leveraging different things. So like, for example, we know that cars are liabilities, right? So one of the most successful businesses I had was a car rental business. So where I took, them being liabilities, or people say depreciating assets, damn, they're the same thing. And then, make them turn into assets. So I would say you can look into that as well. But all in all, it's more so just thinking out the box and figuring out a way to either A, solve a problem, or two, to just go with what works, right? Since the dawn of time, right? The same thing that's been making people rich is the same thing that's still making people rich. So I would say those are the two things that you can look into as far as that.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
With the conversation of the buying power, and I'm used to hearing like CDs and high yielding savings account. What would be better, the buying power of those metals or crypto, or having those CDs?
Buying power all day. Yeah, them CDs and high yields, they're not worth a damn. Unless you have a lot of money to put into a high yield savings, it's not worth it. It's way better for you to put it into the market. It's way better. Like for example, I've seen someone, they take like $1 million and put into high yields. That's completely different. Now they're getting almost $4,000 or $5,000 a month just on the interest. Whereas if you take $1,000, you're getting like 4 pennies. it's not worth it. So I would definitely say the market is always a way to go, right? Even if it goes down. If it goes down, you buy more, right? Because it will go back up. The trend has always continued to go up, especially when it comes to things like gold, the S&P 500 and things like that. So it's always way better to put it into the market than, just doing CDs and high yields is more so for people afraid of risk, right? They're used to their 401ks and Roth IRAs, and they just keep it minimal, right? They're not trying to go too crazy. But, like they say, scared money don't make no money. So that's why they're doing that, and, other people is doing other things. Yeah. So that's what I was saying.
One last question for you. I just want to deviate really quick. As you know, we are human, and health is a constant issue. We get sick, kids get sick, things happen, car accidents, all of that jazz. What is your plan for, like, example, if God forbid you went into the doctor, they give you good news, you have some sort of terminal disease, stage 4 cancer, whatever. What would the rest of your time on earth be? What is your plan as far as finances for your wife, your kids, and whomever else?
I would first say life insurance is something that everybody should have in place, especially if you have kids. This goes again back into investing for the future, whereas a lot of people, they're only focused on the now, and they're not focused on the future. And especially if you're being responsible, that life insurance is cheaper if you do it now while you're young rather than waiting, until later. So if you have that in place, something like that comes into play, you already know, worst case scenario, your family's taken care of. Not just from the life insurance, but also obviously from what you've built from while you were here on earth. So, and this is what goes into making sure you have things that are paying you, right? This is why they say every time you have $1, you look at it as a soldier, right? You send the soldier to war to go fight. So that's why it's important for you to have something bringing you some type of income where you don't have to physically go out and work for it, right? Whether it's you building a business, whether it's you having real estate, whether it's you getting dividends from something that you put money into, but you always should strive into getting into something that's paying you monthly, daily, weekly, without you having to do either much or nothing at all. So that I would say covers if something was to happen health-wise, because let's say, you have something coming in, but you still have to, downsize. At least when you downsize, you don't have to worry about those things getting paid because you still have something coming in.
Got it. What's your thoughts on trust?
I would say trust is a good thing, but again, it's like it all depends on where you at, right? If I don't have anything to protect, it's like I'm gonna go to a trust lawyer and pay them a couple $100 to put, my 2007 Honda, and like that's you wasting your time. Focus on getting some money, putting the money to work, and then when you get to that level of you having to, getting a trust or irrevocable trust or whatever the case may be, then you get into something like that. A lot of the times people are trying to skip the line of success, right? They see what everybody else is flaunting, they see what everybody else is doing, so they want to get into where that person is right now instead of them going through the motions and the process for them to get to that. And the worst part about it is people that do that tends to go back to square one, because you try to skip the process, you end up missing a step and you fall right back down. So that, I would say, is what's most important, is you making sure that you're going through the motions and paying your dues. Because if you gonna have to pay them if you want to get to where you need to go. The last thing that I would say is the importance of supporting each other, right? So knowing whether it's, the husband that has a vision or the wife that has a vision, is making sure that you figure out a way to give your all genuinely into it. Because one thing that I realized, sometimes people do things, and when they don't get the recognition they feel like they deserve, and all of a sudden they're salty, right? So obviously you deserve the recognition, but if you don't get the recognition, that means you wasn't doing it from a genuine place to begin with. You was doing it to receive some type of praise or acknowledgement. So I would say it's very important to support each other in any way that you can, right? So the second I have a business, this is my first employee, my best. Nah, she's not my best employee, I ain't gonna lie. But
She knows what she's good at.
yeah, she becomes the first employee. So I think that's very important as both roles, right? To make sure that you guys are supporting each other, and to making sure that the vision come to pass. Because one of my biggest pet peeves with family in general is that they won't go through the difficulty of telling you how to spend your money, asking you for money. But when it comes time for them to, put some sweat equity in, now all of a sudden they lost all their brain cells. They don't know how to think in advance. They don't know how to do nothing, right? When it's time for them to help you, sustain what's actually bringing the income. So as husband and wife, I would say that shouldn't be a problem. You should always see, okay, how can I pour into this person's vision to make it come to pass, rather quickly and diligently, not more so just recklessly.
Managing and stewarding the finances together as well.
First, I would say, again, is know where you're going, right? So let's say, for example, I ask somebody what is it that they want to do, and they say, I want to be a teacher. You need to know what a teacher's salary is. You can't say I want to be a teacher, but then you expect to have a condo in Midtown. That doesn't make any sense. So you need to know where you're going and be okay with what comes with where you're going, right? So if you know that wherever you're in, the salary is, capped out at, $80,000 a year, you need to be ready for an $80,000 a year life, right? That doesn't come with the hardships of people that are, in the middle class, and they're just increasing their expenses as their income increases as well. So that's number one, is know where you're going. And number two, I would say it's important to, as far as married people, to work as a team, right? I would say I learned this probably around like year 3 of being married, is that too many times we get into, like, let's say a disagreement, or we're not able to really find a compromise, and we're looking at the other person like they're the enemy. And I think that that's one of the most destructive things that you can do. The best thing for you to come to understand, like, for example, this is something my brother taught me. He says, if you ask, whether it's a wife or the other person, do you love me? And they say yes, that answer within itself should give you perspective on how you look at the other person. So meaning, you could say the most heinous thing. The simple fact that I know that you love me, my first reaction is always going to be, thinking about it, processing it, not jumping to conclusions, right? So having that mindset of knowing who I'm dealing with, that's going to make it easy to know that, okay, this person isn't my enemy. We're in this together. We're working as a team.
My second question is, if there were things that as couples we should all be talking about, like with a spouse or together, what are those conversations that you feel like we need to be having with each other in order to determine how we're going to grow in our finances for the future.
Increasing income and decreasing expenses. Like, I think everybody should maybe 2 weeks or every month, no, probably say every month, you have a sit down, you look at, okay, where is the money going? Yeah, budgeting, exactly. So where's the money going? Where should it be going? I think that's the number one conversation that you should be having in regards of, the finances, right? Especially if you have children or you plan to have children, where you want to start, preparing what type of school you want to put them in, what type of extracurricular activities and things like that. Again, preparing for the future. So, and the way you do that is by having a conversation now as how we're going to decrease our expenses and increase our income. And that gave you some brainstorming ideas, because she's actually the one that gave me the teeth whitening idea, right? She just sent it to me, said you should do this. I did it, and praise the Lord, it worked out. Exactly.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I got one. So, obviously we're all married. Most of us are young, so eventually we are gonna have children, hopefully. There's a verse that says, it's in Proverbs, a wise man or a righteous man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. What does that look like to you? And what are some examples you can give? We're all young, so everyone here.
I would say get as many assets as you can, right? Because obviously the people that ends up having, where you're leaving an inheritance for your children's children, it always comes in the form of businesses or real estate, right? Or again, metals and things like that. So that's going to be the best way for you to leave anything behind, right? Either cash value, life insurance, or assets that, that are tangible. Obviously, in this day and age, you have a lot of things that are more so digital. You got AI, you got crypto, and all these different things like that. So, but to keep it simple, I would say, rack up as many assets as you can. And obviously as well, if you're leaving it for your children's children, that means your first children manage it correctly as well, right? So this is why it's also important for everything that you learn, you pass it on to your children. So this is why, train up a child in the way you should go. And when they get old, they won't depart from it. Whereas you see a lot of people, they end up inheriting wealth and they squander it because they don't know how to handle it. So that's two things that's important, is rack up on assets and teach your current children how to manage it and teach them finances and things like that. Yeah, I would say even if you don't desire to be a business owner, real estate is definitely something everybody should have, especially as Christians.
You can start with your own private investor, or maybe.
Yeah, I mean, not just being a private investor, but just getting into the field, the space. Maybe you want to start off first as a wholesaler so you can learn the language and the ropes, and then you get into buying your first property and things like that. This is why a lot of people that do rentals, they stick with the model, never sell. Remember I was telling you earlier, the three biggest things that you worry about is taxes, interest, and equity. Where, with real estate, that's where you're going, majority of the time, you're going to get the biggest forms of equity that you're able to pull out tax-free and then reinvest. So, so even if you don't desire to be a business owner, you should always desire to own property.